And in high school, getting ready for a show, kids would, hide, and I'm like, you want to be a professional in this world, you have to just get used to your body and be comfortable and live in it. You have to live in your body.
Is it considered more important for the guy to have an orgasm than the woman, than the young woman?
I think yes, in that if the guy doesn't, everyone's like, oh my God, what's wrong? Both sides. And you don't want to talk about it, like, bad. But if the girl doesn't, it's like, oh, something's on her mind, like, it's...
Try next time.
Yeah, like, and it's not, because it's not a physical manifestation that's very visual. I think that if the girl doesn't have an orgasm, it's kind of like, or if the guy doesn't have an orgasm, it's like, when do you finish? Like, what's going on? But if a girl doesn't, it's kind of like, when the guy's done, he's done. That's it. He's out of commission. So it's considered more important.
Well, I think also, the interesting question there is, of course, in terms of what we've been talking about all day and for years now, the question is, what you're describing is whether, and what Jess is responding to is, does the guy have, an ejaculation, a climax, and, we're not necessarily, it's more complicated to go to the issue whether either the girl or the boy, or the male or the female, is having a real orgasm. Ergonomically, the issue would be not so much whether you simply ejaculate and are finished. One of the greatest misconceptions, very hard, I find, with female patients, to get them to understand that because they're with a guy who ejaculates regularly, that he's having an orgasm. Dr. Sobey's famous comment was, he would get a patient that would come in, he would take a sexual history and say, well, do you have sex? Oh yes, sometimes 3-4 times a night. He would write that down as a case of impotence. And the guy would say, well, what do you mean? I've ejaculated 4 or 5 times. He's saying, well, there's something wrong. In most cases, but in terms of what we're responding to, for most guys, they would say, hey, and that's the pornographic, vision of every guy and every girl is a super stud, is multiply orgastic in some way, and it's mechanical.
Yeah, I understand your point and I agree. But it wasn't really my question. I guess my question was more about your generation. Is it more aware of orgasm for women?
Yes. And I think that, well, it depends what kind of situation you're in, because I have friends that are in committed relationships, I have friends that are not in committed relationships. If you're in a committed relationship, that's going to be part of the discussion. If you're just sleeping around, no one's going to care about either one's needs. So if you're in a committed relationship, I think it's definitely more discussed, or I don't know, maybe it was discussed in some committed relationships at other times. But I know that my friends in committed relationships, that's a big part of it. They want both people to have an orgasm, both people to feel satisfied. But if you're just sleeping around, it's mostly concentrated on if the guy does, and if he doesn't, he feels bad, and if the girl, and if he doesn't, the girl feels like she did something wrong, and it becomes a whole complicated thing.
Given the fact that your generation is, I would say, more aware of female orgasms than, say, the generation before, or my generation, the generation after or before me, how many guys do you think in your generation are actually aware of the differentiation between, say, ejaculating and having an orgasm for men? And I don't think any of them are. And I think that's part of the problem why you can't get any guys here to speak.
Yeah.
Part of the loaded question, so to speak.
No, I think you're right, and I think that I think a lot of kids in general, guys, girls, a lot of young adults, even adults, don't understand the way their body works, because the way it's taught in sex education is just the guy ejaculates, that's an orgasm, you can get pregnant that way, the end. So no one really knows what's going on with their bodies, so no one wants to talk about it because they might be wrong, and then they'd be really embarrassed because it's sex and they're wrong.
So female orgasm is not taught in sex education?
No. Yes.
Do you think, I don't know if you've read Reich's Sexual Rights of Youth, but do you think something like that, I mean, if it were distributed among young people, that young people would be interested in that kind of thing? That it would get passed around? And,
My friends would.
yeah.
And especially if you said it was dirty and, oh my God, don't tell your parents you have this. Kids wouldn't want to do it. Which is unfortunate, but it's true. Yeah.
So I want to ask the question in a different way. I mean, does the idea of a right, a social right of adolescents to have some kind of healthy sexual life, or at least the right to explore their sexuality and to aspire to having sexual satisfaction, does that make sense to you? Would it make sense to your friends?
Makes sense to me. I think the right.
Because I know that you're shy away from ideology, and you share with Reich a belief that what's really important is how you develop, you know, as an infant and a child, and the attitudes that are transmitted to you, you know, from the people around you who love you and take care of you. And we all agree with that, but there's a problem. There's a circular problem of what's, if anything, society can do to allow it to happen on a mass scale. I mean, I don't know personally to what extent people like the pioneers like Reich and Freud and others are responsible for the changes, for the improvements, obviously, in people's attitudes about sexuality in general and for young people in particular, and to what extent it's just the fact that we live in a pluralistic society, which is a wealthy one, and where people have much more, you know, Reich describes in the 1930s the practical, economic, and political problems really pressing down on people, which we don't have. So we have the freedom in our generation.
Not this year.
Well,
Wait till
you
next
can't
year.
compare it, you
Yeah.
know, with what people had at that
No.
time. I mean, to what extent, what can we do as adults,
To encourage.
as a society to allow it to happen?
I think I think it starts by the parents, how they raise the child, as I said. So as a society as a whole, you have to have enough parents that nurtured their children in a way to make it seem healthy. And you have to have a lot less societal pressure coming in from the outside as the child develops that says it's bad. Because, you know, even, because as I said, when I was 13 or whatever, and my parents had raised me to be comfortable with it, all of a sudden I was uncomfortable with it, which wasn't them, and it wasn't a change in them, it was a change in my other outside factors. So in order to get a society that, you know, makes it seem okay, you have to have more people that are raising children to understand that it is okay.
I think also, just quickly to follow up with it, is that in many ways, a lot of what young women and young men, even if there are still a lot of problems, a lot of things to overcome, have changed, particularly the questions around feminism and the generation of feminists that her mother, who just came in, by the way,
She came in just with a question about
right,
male orgasms. Perfect timing.
And Wendy and a number of other women here, I mean almost all the women here, who've been, you know, involved in making a sea change, certainly in this society, if not certainly in Western society. I mean, it has changed so that young women like Jess and many of her friends do feel they have I think she would be shocked to think that she didn't have a right to many of the things that she has in her relationships. But, yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Because I'm not.
You're not going to let me talk to you?
I'm not sorry. But, no, I don't. I think in terms of what you're saying about having a right to it, I acknowledge the fact that I wouldn't be shocked to hear that I didn't have a right, because in the world there are women in other cultures who don't. And I think it's deplorable, and I think it should be a right, but I don't take it for granted, and I don't think you